very much. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am really pleased to be able to talk a little bit about quantum computing. What I'm really going to be trying to focus on is demystifying this subject. In my opinion, there's really no reason for us to have any questions about the efficacy of quantum technologies. I'm hoping that for those of you that perhaps are encountering this for the first time, for those of you that maybe are experts, there'll be some route map to what's going on out there, but most importantly, to try and get to grasp with the reality of the situation. It is deeply exciting. It happens to be a growing conviction that this is something which will have an impact on humankind in ways that are profound, that perhaps haven't happened since the Industrial Revolution of 200 or 300 years ago. These are big statements. It's not just another payment system. It's not just something which makes our life easier from one day to the next. It could well be that the development of humankind is affected at this milestone in ways which could not have been conceived. It is this aspect of quantum computing that I hope to try and share with you. Of course, this is a commercial conference, and I'll leave time at the end for questions. As was introduced, my name is Ilyas. I'm from Cambridge. I happen to be the chairman of the Stephen Hawking Foundation, and my day job is I'm also the chief executive of Cambridge Quantum Computing. I'll start off by commenting on a slightly different perspective of why we might be interested. I said to you that quantum computing has the impact, or the potential to impact the way we live our lives fundamentally. I have a son, my son is 13 years old. By the time he's my age, in another 100 years, he will definitely be living in a world that is impacted by quantum computing. But what about the next 100 weeks, or the next 100 months? There are currently over 40, close to 45 projects around the world where informed, well-funded, credible organizations have either built or are building a quantum computer. This is perhaps one reason why we should be aware of this. In fact, IBM, Google, and Microsoft have business development units. There are people employed in these organizations who are involved in the commercialization. If you want to try and think of an analogy, and this is largely a very young crowd, so this may be slightly alien to you, but in the mid-1980s we were talking about this wonderful thing called a mobile phone. So imagine that we might be in roughly 1986 or 1987 in the context of adoption. So that's one reason why you might be interested. Another reason is if you're from a computer science background, particularly if you're a developer, you will recognize that these wonderful machines, these Turing machines that we've had now for 70 or more years, are basically not capable of doing very much. Compared to our perspective, our fathers and our grandfathers could not have imagined what this does. But the core family of computational tasks that are achievable is tiny, and we adapt them, and we change them. And engineering has allowed us to get speed, which means that sometimes we become more meaningful. We can watch movies. We might even do some fancy data processing that goes by the name of AI. But there are far more things that we cannot do with computers, with classical computers. And a quantum computer breaches the boundary of what can and cannot be done. So this is another reason why we should be interested. The historical context is perhaps familiar to all of you. When Turing and Shannon and Church and people like that first thought of computing, and these wonderful scientific papers were written, then we're talking about a process which has become codified. The image there is from 1948 in Princeton. Now, all of us are aware that in a small smartphone there may be billions of transistors. But no matter how small those transistors might be, they work on a classical basis. The reason why a quantum computer is different is that the laws which govern what it can and cannot do are different from the laws that govern this. The only difference between this beautiful machine, ENIAC, and the supercomputers of today is processing speed due to the basis of our ability to engineer connections, otherwise known as transistors. It's still a binary system. That's the only thing that's changed. Quantum computing is a terminology that can be dated back to the late 70s and the early 1980s. For those of you that are interested, perhaps the best single source is a paper that was published in 1985 by Feynman, the Nobel laureate. The other people who were given the credit for being the fathers, there's more than one father, are Yuri Manin, a Soviet mathematician still alive, David Deutsch, an Oxford physicist still alive. Sadly, Feynman is no longer with us. And he was interested in the critical issue of heat dissipation. If some of you are engineers, then you'll recognize that in the late 1970s at IBM, people like Charlie Bennett were worried about the cost of computation. You put a massive amount of energy in, and on the other side, here, you get a little trickle of information, and you don't want this to blow up in the meantime. So how do you deal with heat dissipation? How can you generate something that's computationally useful? And Feynman thought about doing it using, as a fundamental unit of computation, of information, a quantum subatomic or atomic particle, primarily subatomic. I'll come back to that in a minute. There are, anybody here who's interested in computational complexity? Anybody? Yeah, right. So if you're familiar with P versus MP, okay. So one of the other reasons that dates back to that time is, are we in fact going to be able to do something that is MP complete? Traveling salesman is just a generic way of trying to compute something which is an answer. The jury's still out on whether a quantum computer may or may not solve, but it will certainly get further down this chain. This is applicable in many, many, many different areas. It's called traveling salesman, but you use it every single day of the week. But all computers are physical objects. Every single computer is a physical object. It's not the figment of somebody's imagination. So the next couple of minutes, I'll try and walk you through that aspect. Before I do that, I'd like to draw your attention to something which I think is fundamentally important to the European project. A computer scientist today is someone who is steeped in a discipline. He might have a mathematical background. I'm a category theorist. My background mathematically is that. But it's fairly deep and narrow. Quantum mechanics and quantum computing brings together at its core a number of disciplines that have shaped the advance of humankind. Chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, computer science come together. Somebody was telling me that there are tens of millions of people around the world who make a living from computer programming and computer software. It wouldn't surprise me if there's 100 million people out of the 8 billion that make a living. And out of those, there may be 100,000 that are earning huge salaries, and there might be 50,000 who are really the titans of the universe. You know, the total number of people who can actually understand and implement quantum algorithms is perhaps 1,000. So one of the issues here is, how do we advance knowledge. And that's why I'm so interested in the commercialization. When people start paying money, then talent changes. Today in the United Kingdom, we will have a few thousand graduates in quantum information theory. 10 years ago, you might have had a few dozen. Here in Germany and in France and at Caltech and at MIT, it's changing. Why? Well, there are many reasons why. But one reason you should bear in mind, this is a click away on your Google if you're interested. In 2015, we faced the tipping point. In 2015, Google went commercial. They acquired from the University of California, Santa Barbara, the entire quantum computing effort. Not just one person, not just 10 people. The amount of capital that has gone into this over the course of 3 years from just those big guys dwarfs everything else. Don't take my word for it. Have a look at the annual reports of Google, Microsoft. Watch the speech, the keynote speech of Satya Nadella last year at Ignite. Have a look at the Microsoft annual report. How many hundreds of people work in quantum computing? There's a reason for that. It's no longer a research project. Now, I mentioned earlier that the laws of quantum mechanics are different, which is why quantum computing is different. We are hardwired to understand the big. Which one of us cannot see up and look in the sky and understand if somebody tells me there are 200 billion stars in this galaxy? 200 billion stars, we understand that. Our minds can get it, my 13-year-old son can get that. And if I told you that actually there might be 1 trillion galaxies, no, we can understand that. And then if I said to you that the furthest reaches of the galaxy are never going to be achievable even at superluminal speed because it's going away faster than we could ever get to it, we can kind of get that. We are used to the big, but if we go small, we don't get it. We're not hardwired for that. So how many, for example, it's so hard, how many atoms, individual atoms, might there be in a grapefruit, or an apple? Anybody want to give a guess? Yesterday that was the case. Thank you, I appreciate the humour. The point is that if we had blueberries, and you'll have seen this many times before, this analogy, so my apologies, I'm borrowing this from somebody else. But if you know, a blueberry, a small little blueberry, and you filled out this hole with blueberries, you haven't even made a start. If you took the whole of Europe and you filled it, and you could make a sphere out of that surface area, and you filled the sphere, the 3 dimensions, with blueberries, you wouldn't get anywhere. You would have to fill the earth with blueberries, and you still wouldn't get close. That's how many atoms there are. But you know, an atom is just space. An atom is just space. There's a nucleus in the middle, and there's space. It's 10,000 times bigger than what we are using now, which is an electron. Or perhaps, even more amazing, a single photon. And so for the same reason we can understand and appreciate things like gravitational waves, the same engineering that has advanced us in those areas is now being applied in quantum computing. Now the laws are different. I've probably run out of time. I don't even know how... Is there an organizer here? How... Well, I'll keep talking until they kick me off, yeah. No, I'm not Stephen Hawking. What was I saying? Yeah, so the laws are different. So there are many laws I could explain, but I'm just going to explain 2 or 3 of them. And they're very easy to understand. Quantum entanglement and superposition are 2 of the things which are different. So if so I won't do this, but if I had an apple or a ball and I chucked it, it would go through a trajectory, and obviously it would obey the laws of relativity and gravity, and these things we know about. In fact, even these machines are working on the basis of classical laws of physics. But at the end of the day, at the quantum level, the laws are different. One law that is different is this wonderful, beautiful thing called quantum entanglement. I'm not going to try and explain it. Other than to say that if you're inspired to, you really should. There's a number of YouTube videos, less than 10 minutes. They explain why things which are separated spatially can interact and affect each other at faster, seemingly, than the laws of physics should allow. So if I want to find information entombed in a photon here, and way over in, I don't know, the Andromeda galaxy, there was another entangled photon. By looking at this one, I would know the information in that one. And this can be scaled. It's a very crude, naive example. The other law, superposition, is even slightly more mind-boggling, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But it is the ability to have a state of information that is more than one. What I mean by this is in classical computers, a 0 or a 1 and a concatenation, an expansion of zeros and ones captures information. So this video or whatever is just zeros and ones. In a static solid state, it is only a 0 or a 1. In a quantum world, a quantum bit is 0 and 1 and all states in between. The problem is that our language, our human language, hasn't adapted to this type of thing yet. So when we describe it, we get confused. But quantum mechanics is the most experimentally proven of all sciences in the last 100 years. So it doesn't matter whether we don't understand the words, we can prove it experimentally. So what does, you need to press the thing at the bottom, it's gone to sleep. No? Well, I'll go extemporary. It's my screensaver. There you go, thank you. So what does this really mean? So if you had two bits, two classical bits, each bit could be 0 or 1. And so any combination of those could be used to represent a possibility. One combination could be 2 zeros, etc., etc., etc. So you have 8 states coming out of those 2. However, in a quantum bit called a qubit, then those 2 qubits are all of those 8 states at the same time. That is superposition. So the amount of information you can carry, and not just 0 or 1, you must of course be familiar with the fact that there's an infinity of states between 0 and 1. 0.1, 0.01, So if you think of this as a sphere, and you think of the surface of the sphere as being a single data point, it encompasses and captures all those data points. So this is a very powerful property that we can utilize, or is beginning to be utilized. One, and I don't want you to get hung up on speed, but one factor is speed. And what I mean by that is, so for example, if I said to you, hello, how are you? What's your name? Eddie. Nitin. So if I went like this 10 times with 10 people, I would do 10 operations, and how many pieces of information would I capture if I asked their name? 10. But if I did that, and you were a quantum bit, not Nitin, then you get 2 to the power of 10. 1024 pieces of information. Again, it's a little bit crude, and I'm sorry that it might sound a little bit sensationalist, but these are well experimented and documented. And if you want to YouTube superposition, there's some brilliant explanations of this. So that's one reason why quantum computing is different. In fact, I was interested, the guy that spoke earlier said, a very nice speech as well, so I'm not being critical, that their network might be quantum proof. I don't think anything's quantum proof. The stars, so I'm interested in things like that to understand what that means. A quantum computer destroys all known methods of encryption. Now, we don't have them at the moment, and I don't know whether they're 2 years away or 10 years away, but I'm interested when people talk about quantum proofing. So the NIST website in Colorado, and the NSA website, and the NCSC website in the UK are the definitive places to look at quantum proof or pre-quantum secure algorithms, if you're interested in that. So what does that really mean? I'm going to skip this slide because it means I have to walk about. So this one, so I'm just going to look at 3 or 4 areas where quantum computing will have an impact in the short term. Now, if you're very young, which means that you're below the age of 30, 5 years is a very long time. For all those of us who are lucky enough to be above the age of 30, 5 years is yesterday or tomorrow. You know, it's 2013. Right? So there's an informed consensus that commercial implementation in a manner that will affect all of us will happen in this period in certain areas, not in all areas. There's a lack of consensus. Every single day there are people with different opinions, but this is a sort of a mainstream view of the next sort of 5 years of development. So chemistry, machine learning, cryptography, and new materials. New materials are slightly different from chemistry. We'll skip this one as well. It's a bit boring. Right, so AI, machine learning and optimization. When we look at quantum machine learning, what we're doing is looking at the adoption of traditional machine learning methodologies, especially the deep neural networks, and we're replacing the nodes at the depth with quantum bits. If you're interested, the single best paper on this is Adversarial Quantum Circuits by a brilliant and a beautiful scientist called Marcello Benedetti. There are a number of people who would, and it explains what this really means, and early adoption is happening now. Implementation-wise, one area that this will become useful, look, I don't know whether it's 1 year or whether it's 5 years, is crop yield forecast. The other, of course, is patterns, which we cannot see, and which existing classical computers cannot see. Even the most powerful supercomputers, it might be utilized in financial markets optimization. There's a lot of literature on this. And the IBM website on quantum is probably the best source one of the best sources for more information on this. I've also done an animation which I'm not showing, so if you really like the sound of my voice, for 3 minutes I talk about quantum machine learning. It's on our website. Quantum chemistry. Now, the dream has been to have new materials, a material that when you push electricity through it, it doesn't go away, or which at least stores it in a static state, not just a dynamic transmission. This will change our lives. There are people who think we will have energy surplus, free energy, by the mid-2030s. Why? Because at the moment, we cannot convert sunlight into energy for all kinds of reasons. The photovoltaic process that a single plant, a leaf does, we cannot replicate. And fertilizer, the Haber-Bosch mechanism that allows us is 80, 90 years old. This will change, and this will change soon. And these are absolutely going to change our lives. Of course, drug discovery, drug delivery. These are the things that matter, and this is why quantum computing is important. Satya Nadella is a lot more articulate than I am on this. This is, encryption. I mean, is anybody interested in encryption or not? Do you want me to spend it? Oh, right. Okay. Well, RS is pretty much dead. And if you don't know that, then please wake up. The reason is that the seed for almost every method for handshakes, one of the reasons that none of this blockchain or distributed ledgers or IoT stuff is ever going to get off the ground until we solve this, get off the ground in a global way, is unless we have a simple and secure method that's replicable, which can secure you and me from identifying ourselves. So these single key session tokens that are quantum now exist. The best literature on this, in my opinion, is on the Cisco website. Look, if you want to bury your head in the sand and say it's 30 years away, knock yourselves out. But the reason why it's not is that quantum computers at some point will well, anyway, there's a scarcity of factors, of prime numbers once you get to the super primes. Anyway, so you get repeating patterns. And then the other issue is there's no randomness. Randomness is pseudo. So the only form of maximal randomness, the only way is quantum, which of course means that all seeding methodologies disappear. Do any of you work in large networks, sort of server farms and stuff like that, or in a bank? I mean, the number of times you have to reseed just to keep going is ridiculous. So a quantum computer resolves that. This is a machine that exists today, which generates maximal randomness that never has to be reseeded. It's a 4-qubit quantum computer. It's about this big, this box, and it's being deployed now. I mean, this is just the image just takes apart the different components. And this technology has been known really for a number of years. Many university labs have it. It's just being utilized right now. This is not something I'm going to talk about. Before me, the young man had a very nice thing about Bill Gates, that we know less than we really believe we want to know about tomorrow, than we do about 3 or 4 years from now. He said it in the way of underestimating change. He's not the only author of this. Isaac Newton said this as well, in a different way. And I would encourage you to think of this in terms of quantum computing. I don't think we should say, what can it do, what can it do? I just don't think we know what it can do. There are 70 people in my company, and the big breakthroughs in the last 2 years have happened with young people between the age of 20 and 25. They know what you can do with quantum computing. I don't. I can tell you what it can't do, but you're not interested in what it can't do. You're interested in what it can do. And so there are some amazing things that are happening, and I'm going to stop there because that's the end. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, I'm more than sure that there will be questions after your speech. So please raise your hand if you have any question. Don't be scared. Yeah.
So the new quantum computer will break all the encryptions. So we can use this entanglement as the verification, but I guess it cannot secure the data. Is there any other way to secure the data in quantum world?
Yeah, so data at rest, voice and messaging secured using that small device is already possible. So there's something called Mosca's inequation, or Mosca's inequality, MOSCA. Mikhail Mosca is quite famous in this encryption area, and he came up with this idea that when this inequality is breached, then you have to be quantum secure. The idea is that there are trillions of dollars of invested infrastructure in the world, and you cannot change that overnight. So if the length of time that your data has to be secure is longer than the length of time that it takes to convert, then you're in trouble. The view is that, not my view, but the NIST, the NSA rather, and others, that Mikhail Mosca's inequality was breached last year. So at the moment, the main focus is on defense. If you ask my opinion, a universal quantum computer capable of hacking everything is probably more than 5 years away, maybe closer to 10. But of course, that's not very long. I mean, if you're a drug company, you don't care about 2 years or 5 years. Your plan is whatever. When you build airports, when you build cars, when you build pretty much anything, when you're building blockchain industry, you don't care about 1 year. You care about 10 and 20 years if you want global adoption. So that inequality was breached. Data at rest, voice and communications can be now protected using quantum. So that is already available. Not scaled. These early machines are a bit heavy, probably bit rates of maybe 4 million a second. Are you in the encryption space? Yeah, so 4 million a second sounds a lot, but you need about 100 of these machines in a server farm. So, it's just the early stages. Did I kind of answer your question? No. All right, okay.
Any other question? Yep.
Thank you for the talk. In your opinion, what's the biggest challenge in writing code for a quantum computer right now?
So when I skipped the one slide that I said is useless, of course you've asked that question, the conventional thought of Microsoft through Azure, IBM through Watson, Amazon through AWS, and I missed somebody out, Google through Google Cloud, is that you don't have to learn quantum algorithms. You will use existing high-level languages, and the fancy stuff in the middle will convert it into the circuits. Remember, so I said a quantum computer is a physical thing, so why is it physical? It generates, manipulates through a circuit, and then measures the result of a qubit, right? So a quantum algorithm needs to be converted into a quantum circuit. That quantum algorithm, of course, that's very valuable, but once you've got that algorithm, its use case might be many. So typically, quantum algorithms are open source. Use cases are the software, and so you as a developer could go on. If you haven't, you must do it. How old are you? Right, you've got to do this. What's your name? Sorry? Dimar, right? So IBM, seriously, all of you, doesn't matter, you could be 55, I'm 55. If you go onto the IBM website, there's a free access to a 5-qubit machine. It's not a simulator, it's a real quantum machine. The interface is called QSKit, and you can play around with it, and you'll have your first quantum circuit, knowing you, smart boy, within about half an hour. Seriously, I'm not joking. Companies like mine are the people that do the middle bit, so we build the compilers that do all that kind of stuff.
One more question. What does quantum computing means for IoT ecosystem?
Too early, sorry. So I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. You need somebody smarter than me. I think it shifts, it definitely, so the question, so nowadays I talk to a lot of corporations, and what I say to them is if you have a plan, which is a 5-year plan, you should ask yourself how a quantum technology affects that plan. So I'm probably not allowed to say this because this is advertising, but I was in Stuttgart the other day visiting one of the world's major companies that is focused on this. And they know better than me how quantum computing will affect it, and they obviously are very worried about it. What I can do is then give them the tools. There are other people better than me who can answer that question. But it definitely, if you've got a 5-year plan and it involves IoT, you have to ask yourself how quantum technology will affect it. Guys, there's a difference between quantum technologies and quantum computing. So it's very easy. Who's got a laser here? No, don't put your hands up. If you have a laser, you have a quantum technology. Right? So there are quantum technologies used for quantum metrology and sensing to within absolute degrees of perfection where you are, where something is. So measuring is a quantum technology, basically. So there's quantum technologies, then there's quantum computing, and that's the spectrum. Some of these things are available today, forget the laser, but the thing about the protection thing that I showed earlier. So I wish I could say more, I'm just babbling now, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Wait. Oh, one more.
Yep.
I have a question. How expensive is actually one quantum computer? I mean, there's very different ones, and what are the challenges and milestones that need to be addressed to really make this thing mainstream?
Well, they're not expensive. I mean, how much is one of those big supercomputers? $30 million, $20 million? You need a facility to house it, so it'll be no more or no less than those. There's a variety of people with different ideas about how to make them. IBM has a certain approach, Microsoft has a certain approach. I think in a few years' time we'll find out which one is more scalable. I think that it's an engineering challenge. Have any of you ever heard of the name Todd Holmdahl? Do you know, so Todd perhaps is the most successful engineer still alive. He's at Microsoft, he was Mr. Xbox and many, many other things. So they made Todd in charge of quantum. So, and he had a very wonderful way of describing, so I'm going to borrow from him. This is not my answer, it's Todd's answer. So thank you, Todd, he's not listening. So if there's anybody working at Microsoft, you know this. So he said he's 57, he's going to retire at 63, they will resolve the engineering problem before then. So the challenges are engineering. Certain challenges are what's the word? Something temperatures. Sub-cryogenic temperatures, so there's engineering around that, there's engineering around decoherence, there's engineering around control mechanisms, so those are the main challenges. But the biggest challenges are not hardware now. The biggest challenge this young boy said about the algorithms. What can you do with them? Right? So if I gave you the beautiful machine, a great supercomputer, what are you going to do with it? You're going to kick it? It has to do something, right? So that's where the challenge is.
So a big applause to Ilyas that made a great speech.